Upon moving in with Luke, my initial impressions were a mix of curiosity and apprehension. Luke was a reclusive figure, often shrouded in an air of mystery that intrigued me. The house itself was an old creaky structure with a unique layout. It featured a narrow hallway that led to a cozy living room filled with mismatched furniture and an eclectic collection of books lining the shelves. The kitchen, while small, had a certain charm with its vintage appliances and a window that overlooked a quaint garden. However, it was the atmosphere that struck me the most. There was a palpable sense of solitude that enveloped the space, hinting at Luke's preference for quiet and order. As I settled in, I quickly learned about Luke's strict house rules, which were both unusual and somewhat daunting. For instance, there was a no-shoes policy that extended beyond the typical request. Guests were expected to remove their shoes at the door and wear designated house slippers at all times. Additionally, Luke had a strict cleaning schedule that dictated when and how chores were to be completed, leaving little room for flexibility. I found myself feeling a mix of amusement and discomfort as I navigated these rules, questioning whether I could adapt to such a regimented lifestyle. While I appreciated the cleanliness and order, I couldn't help but feel a bit stifled by the lack of spontaneity. Despite my reservations, I made a quick decision to move in without a formal lease, driven by a sense of urgency and the allure of affordable rent. The prospect of living in a space that was both unique and affordable was too tempting to pass up, even if it meant adhering to Luke's peculiar guidelines. I rationalized my choice, telling myself that I could always adjust to the rules or find a way to negotiate them later. However, as the days turned into weeks, I began to realize that living with Luke would require more than just compliance. It would demand a level of understanding and adaptability that I had not anticipated. This experience would ultimately challenge my perceptions of cohabitation and push me to navigate the delicate balance between personal freedom and shared living. As time went on, my initial curiosity about living with Luke began to morph into a growing discomfort that I could no longer ignore. The strange noises at night became a regular occurrence, soft shuffling sounds, faint whispers, and the unsettling creak of floorboards that seemed to echo through the quiet house. At first, I attributed these disturbances to the old structure settling, or perhaps Luke's nocturnal habits. However, as the nights wore on, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. It was as if the house itself was alive, and I was merely a guest in a space that belonged to someone else entirely. One incident that particularly rattled me occurred one evening when I returned home to find my bedroom door unlocked. I distinctly remembered locking it before I left, and the realization that it had been ajar sent a chill down my spine. As I stepped inside, I felt an overwhelming sense of vulnerability wash over me. The unsettling thought that someone had been in my personal space lingered in the air, and I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. It was as if Luke had crossed an invisible boundary, one that I had assumed was understood in any shared living situation. The violation of my privacy left me feeling exposed and confused, questioning whether I had misjudged Luke's character from the outset. In the days that followed, my discomfort only deepened. I began to notice Luke's behavior becoming increasingly intrusive. He would often linger outside my door, and I could sense his presence even when I was alone in my room. The feeling of being watched was suffocating, and I found myself second-guessing every sound and movement. I felt trapped in a situation that was supposed to be a fresh start, but instead, it had morphed into a source of anxiety. The combination of strange noises and the unsettling feeling of being monitored created an atmosphere of tension that was hard to ignore. Ultimately, I felt a profound sense of violation and confusion. I had entered this living arrangement seeking companionship and affordability, but instead, I found myself grappling with an unsettling reality. The boundaries of privacy that I had taken for granted were being blurred, and I was left questioning not only my safety, but also my judgment in choosing to live with Luke. Each day became a struggle to reclaim my sense of security in a space that felt increasingly foreign. After weeks of discomfort and unease, I finally mustered the courage to confront Luke about the invasion of my privacy. The incident with the unlocked door had left me feeling vulnerable, and I knew I could no longer ignore the unsettling atmosphere that had taken root in our shared home. One evening, I found myself pacing the living room, rehearsing what I would say. I took a deep breath and approached Luke, who was seated at the kitchen table, engrossed in a book. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach as I prepared to voice my concerns. "Luke, can we talk?" I began, trying to keep my tone steady. "I need to discuss something that's been bothering me." He looked up, his expression unreadable, and nodded slowly. I hesitated for a moment, gathering my thoughts before I continued. "I noticed my bedroom door was unlocked the other day when I came home. I locked it before I left, and it really made me uncomfortable." As I spoke, I watched his face for any sign of understanding or acknowledgement, but instead he seemed to deflect my concerns. "Oh, that must have been a mistake," he replied casually, brushing it off as if it were no big deal. "Sometimes I forget to check doors." His evasive response only fueled my growing distrust. I pressed on, hoping to elicit a more genuine reaction. "But it's not just that. I felt like I'm being watched, and it's really unsettling. I need to feel safe in my own space." Luke's demeanor shifted slightly, but he quickly masked it with a nonchalant shrug, insisting that I was overreacting. "You're just not used to living with someone else," he said dismissively. His lack of concern and the way he sidestepped my feelings only deepened my unease. I could feel the tension in the air, and it became clear to me that my concerns were falling on deaf ears. The conversation left me feeling more isolated than ever, and I realized that I could no longer ignore the threat I felt in this environment. That night, as I lay in bed, I made the difficult decision to leave the house. The thought of continuing to live under the same roof as Luke, with his evasive behavior and my growing distrust, felt unbearable. I needed to reclaim my sense of safety and peace, even if it meant starting over elsewhere. The weight of my decision hung heavily on me, but I knew it was the right choice for my well-being. When I was assigned a new roommate, David, by the school, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. After my unsettling experience with Luke, I was eager for a fresh start. David's initial demeanor was warm and friendly. He greeted me with a broad smile and an enthusiastic handshake that instantly put me at ease. His easygoing nature and willingness to engage in conversation made me feel hopeful about our living arrangement. As we unpacked our belongings and set up our shared space, I appreciated his laid-back attitude and sense of humor. It seemed like we were off to a great start, and I couldn't help but feel optimistic about the months ahead.